brief words about the Jewish Federation of New Mexico. Founded in 1948, the Jewish Federation of New Mexico provides Jewish engagement and services for our state's nearly 25,000 Jewish residents, as well as many others, throughout the life cycle, from birth to old age, from generation to generation. Please do consider supporting our important work, which relies on the generosity of our donors to benefit not just the Jewish community, but indeed diverse communities across New Mexico. And all of this is conducted from a place of Jewish values. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the chair of this evening's event, a multi-term past Federation president, current board vice president at large, and the chairwoman of our Federation's programming committee. Please welcome Sabra Minkus.
Thanks, Zach. I think you're in for a very special treat. I became interested in Bob's work when I used to watch him frequently on CNN. His role was played by George Clooney in the movie Syriana, and Mr. Clooney got the Oscar. I hope Bob got some of the royalties. He speaks 8 different languages. He's the author of several books that have been on the New York Times bestseller list. And he's just a super nice person. And it is my privilege to introduce to you Bob Baer. Bob?
Let me tell you who I am and why I'm here, and that's I spent 21 years in the CIA. I joined on a prank. People ask me, why would you join the CIA? I was at Berkeley, and yeah, I know. I was at Berkeley, and anyhow, I was staying with a friend, sleeping on his couch, and said, you need a job. And said, well, I'll apply for the CIA. So I called the Federal Center and said, I want to talk. This is Federal Center in San Francisco. I said, I want to join the CIA. Can I talk to the CIA? There's a long pause. I'm sure they thought they had a lunatic on the other end. And then they gave me a number in Lawndale, California. If anybody knows where Lawndale is, it's at Auto Malls. Anyhow, I wrote them, and I got in, and 21 years later, I'm in Iraq leading an assassination team to kill Saddam Hussein, and not the entire government was aware of it, nor was the FBI, that I had a lethal finding. Anyhow, when you get off the airplane and you're met by the FBI and you're badged for murder and attempted murder, it's time to move on when your employer's trying to put you in jail. So I resigned from the CIA. My wife did as well. We had got a letter of declination. It was all sorted out. We had a lethal finding. And since then, I've been in film, both documentaries, scripted and non-scripted. And that means I work for the History Channel, CNN, I write books, and trying to make sense of my career in the CIA and make sense of politics. Khashoggi, oh, this is just outrageous. Khashoggi, what about my ideas of the Khashoggi case? The far right is trying to claim that he was sort of a Muslim brother, he was dealing with Al-Qaeda. It's just not true. I mean, what you have in Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader is a psychopath. There's no ambiguity in this. Clearly he's a psychopath. He ordered Khashoggi. There's almost 100% certainty that he monitored it on a phone line. He ordered the guy to be beheaded. That's what the Saudis do. I'm sorry, I apologize for Saudis. It's, if there's any here, I do apologize, but that's what they do, as they admit. And you've got this kid, he starts off his political life by getting in a property dispute, and he takes a bullet and puts it in there in an envelope and sends it to the judge and said, you know what's next. So you have a thug that's running the kingdom into the ground. You have a war in Yemen. It's a quagmire. It cannot be won. And you have Saudis now are talking about openly assassinating him. They're saying if he crosses this line, we're going to kill him. Now, these are my opinions, but I listen to American ambassadors who have spent many, many years there, and they all sort of share the same thing. Now, the question is, should we be supporting a psychopath? And have you ever known a psychopath to cure himself over the years and get better? So I think we're sitting on, you know, a bomb there that's going to go off. I mean, when this guy's going to get worse, and he is getting worse, and how he's going to cause things to fall apart, I can't tell you. But like I said, I've never seen psychopaths cure themselves. And we've got one of these guys here, which scares me about the Gulf. Because same thing in Abu Dhabi. You have the Crown Prince is running, Mohammed bin Zayed is running the place. I don't like him because the guy that did Syriana let us film in Dubai, he's thrown him in jail, incommunicado with his family, no lawyers. It's a desert out in the middle of nowhere. You have very insecure royal families that are cracking down on dissent. Now, it's not our business why, but they're very afraid. And what they're very afraid of is Iran. John Bolton and these people whom I know are worried about Iran. Bibi Netanyahu is worried about Iran, and they should be. You just simply have to look at the geography. The government in Iraq is controlled by Iranian intelligence. End of story. There's articles that are going to come out. It's absolutely undisputed. You've got Syria, where you've got Bashar al-Assad, cannot move without the Russians and the Iranians. And then you've got Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is the de facto government. When I go to Lebanon, I call Hezbollah and say, can I come? I know the way they operate and visit, but I clear it with them, being ex-CIA. You absolutely have to clear it with them. So what you have is this arc of Iranians, and then run by the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and specifically the Quds Force, which is the guys got hit last night by the Israeli Air Force with their missiles or whatever they shot at them. And it is a serious threat. As I said in 2002, the biggest mistake we could ever make was invade Iraq, because that empowers Iran. I don't see it any other way. And you didn't need to be a genius to see that, but that's exactly what happened. So you've got a very insecure Gulf Arabs that are reacting by closing down all dissent. Not only that, you're now into second and third generation of the Saudi royal family, which, like anybody who's grown up with privilege and money, it's a very hard adjustment for these people. And plus, it's an opaque country, you know, and they don't particularly like us. What type of assets does Hezbollah have in Lebanon? The most cohesive, secretive force in the world, barring none, is Hezbollah. One of the films I did was called Cult to the Suicide Bomber, and it was done just talking to suicide bomber families through the Middle East, Iran, Afghanistan. I just went around and just like very, almost in a Forrest Gump manner, asking them what they were thinking. And I went down to southern Lebanon and met the family of the boy who drove a truck into Israeli intelligence headquarters in Tyre. Now, I'm almost sure that his brother was the driver into the Marine headquarters, but they just would give nothing up. And I said, where's your brother? They wouldn't tell me. It fits. There's enough intelligence on that. They don't give up secrets. They don't want to. They don't write memoirs. They're disciplined. And what they're doing now is they're bringing thousands and thousands of rockets into southern Lebanon, and they're tunneling them into the mountains. And the plan is that, you know, if they're solid fueled and they're bringing solid fuel in, you can get them out and you can swarm Israeli air defenses. This is real. This is not a manufactured threat by the Israelis. It's real. You just rocket after rocket after rocket. So something has to give in the Middle East, because if those rockets keep coming to Lebanon and going in caves, the strategic balance will change. No conventional army is going to beat Israel. It's untouchable, nor is any air force. And I think these new S-300 missiles that they've brought in, the Israelis could probably take them out in a day. But it's the Hezbollah rockets and their ability to keep a secret and just sort of block any intelligence collection is the threat. I think the Israelis are going to have to react to Iran, and I don't know where that goes. It's unpredictable. And, you know, like I said, invading Iraq in 2003 was about the dumbest thing that we could ever do. And there you have it. Okay. Well, the Syrians are, a long time ago I had, with the Bush administration, I was running sort of a back channel with the Syrian government. And they remember that, so they let me go back. And so there was a point where there were questions being asked about which passports, Syrian passport blanks, were stolen from the Islamic State. So I went to the government and I said, I'm going to Syria. Is there anything you want to know? I said, we want the passport blanks. And being sort of a Forrest Gump figure, I said, yeah, I'll go ask. And I mean, I had no diplomatic immunity, no connection to the government, not paid or anything. And so the head of intelligence agrees to see me as we're driving over into Syria. And he said, yeah, I'll see you today, and I'm going to send you my car. And that's the dumbest thing in the world, is to drive around in the personal car of the head of Syrian intelligence around Damascus with car bombs going off. It's really dumb. Don't do it. Remember the old New England Life stuff? They could make an advertisement out of that. So they pick me up, and we drive to Syrian intelligence headquarters, and it's 5 buildings that go, it's a long way. It's huge. And even though this is the man's driver, he didn't know which building he was in. So we drove from building to building asking, and all the buildings had porticos over them so you couldn't photograph them from satellites. And they were telling me that when the chief goes out, he has 20 identical cars that drive out the gate at once, about 60 miles an hour, and they fan out you don't know which one he's in. But we spent the best part of the morning going from office to office. Finally, we go to and then they're moving me from office to office, at each one giving me sweet tea and a cookie. And by a couple hours later, I really needed to go to the bathroom. But I did wait. I did meet the guy. But it's such an opaque regime, and it was so broken in the war, in the Civil War, that the only defense it has is Iran and Russia, the Russian Air Force, the Iranian Army, and Hezbollah. When we drove across the border from Lebanon into Syria, there was a road, and you could see the Hezbollah people going back and forth. They had taken over the military road. But more oddly is when we got to the Syrian side of the border, this man comes up to me and says, give me your passport. I was with people from the presidency, and I handed him my passport. And I said, started talking to him in Arabic. And I looked at my escort, my Syrian guy, and said, he's not Syrian. He says, no, he's about Hezbollah. So think what that means. Hezbollah is taking passports on the Syrian side of the border. And that's the kind of story that starts, how serious it is. So you have this country, a lot of the fighting has been done by Hezbollah, and of course a lot of the Iraqi militia groups are very well connected to Hezbollah. So that you've got this Hezbollah arc. No one puts it in that terms, but you look at it incrementally, and that's a good case to be made. Well, we're talking about the withdrawal from Syria. You have to look at what Joint Special Operations Command, our special forces, were doing in Syria. It's the most successful counterinsurgency which this country has been involved in, going back to, going back to the British in Malaysia. using Kurds, our intelligence, our air cover, drones, we were systematically destroying the Islamic State. Our withdrawing from Syria means that the only real ally they've got is Bashar al-Assad. So you've taken the Kurds and effectively put them back under the control of the Iranians and the Russians. I don't know of anybody in the military that I talked to that thought this was a good idea. In fact, our military is what should I say, openly rebellious about this. It's a strategically stupid thing to do. And I'm just passing on what the military says. I mean, these are where I'm talking about, you know, admirals and generals. They're just dumb. And we were losing basically nobody when there were, you know, 3 people recently, but it was very successful. And it's you know, what scares me is the Islamic State is not going away. You have to equate the Islamic State with Sunni Islam. They've lost, the Sunnis have lost 4 major capitals. I mean, it is a community on the downslope, and that's when people get very dangerous when they reach out for radical solutions. Anybody governed by fear wants to be governed by faith. And this is what a lot of people do. And then you have Iraq, where a lot of the tribal groups that sided with us are being, have gotten no political power back and are essentially starving, and they're tending to go back to the Islamic State. The Islamic State is not gone. I can't tell you whether they're going to be setting off a bomb in Santa Fe or not, but that hate and resentment is there, and they, you know, they're back. And without a political solution in the Middle East, you're not going to stop this stuff. You know, it was just dumb, and I don't know anybody. The only people I can see justified are people in the White House. It's okay because we can take care of Syria from our bases in Iraq with helicopters. It's a 15-minute helicopter ride to almost anywhere in Syria where we're at. I don't believe that because I think we need the Kurds. We need their intelligence. And I think it's a mistake we're going to pay for a long time. And now the accusation, of course, is he did this for Putin, for Russia. But, you know, let's see the evidence. Well, I mean, those were embargoed funds, and that was part of the deal. But I mean, look, you have to look at this objectively. The nuclear deal did keep intrusive inspections on Iran, but the real threat to Saudi Arabia and Israel is non-conventional weapons, and that wasn't addressed. So this was just a partial agreement with Iran. I mean, you really do need to, you know, everything Trump does, you need to be fair. I mean, whether you're liberal or conservative, and what they are complaining about is sending all these rockets to Hezbollah. You can't, you know, but that was Iranian money, and that was part of the deal, and that's what the Iranians demanded, so as part of the treaty. But we're not gonna really know the outcome of that until we see what happens between Israel and Iran. My question is, and I'm an Arabist, and I spent my entire life, is what we actually do know, which is very little. These are closed societies. We have. All right, let's go back to Abbottabad, my favorite hobby horse. Who in Pakistan was supporting Osama bin Laden? I've been to Abbottabad. You don't go to Abbottabad, build a house, move in, not take your trash out, and tell the Pakistanis, you know, forget it, we're not going to, it's not possible. Somebody in the Pakistani government, as the Secretary of Defense said, was supporting him. So Pakistan is our major ally, and we don't know what their agenda is. Of course, their mortal enemy, India, is what they're really fighting, not us. But the point is, it's how little we know about the Middle East. You know, when you go back to the 50s, we were waltzing in and out of palaces, We knew what was going on. We armed people. We knew everything in the Middle East. We sort of supported a coup at Mossadegh. That wasn't really done by the CIA. It was, they gave the Shah a backbone, but we still knew what was going on, and so did the British. One of the reasons I left the CIA is because we started getting closed out of, what was going on. I mean, you could read the New York Times or the Washington Post and figure out what was going on as well as inside the CIA. So it's what we don't know that scares me. I mean, if Iran goes back to make a nuclear bomb, if the Saudis do, what the Pakistanis are going to do, and then we have no idea what to do about it. Did you all see that there was a car bomb today? Killed 90 plus Afghan soldiers, special forces, intelligence guys. So you've got this, and then again, I don't particularly like the Saudis, but what are they doing to support these movements? Do they support at some level, a private level, the Islamic State because they're scared? We don't know. There's so many dynamics that, I throw my hands up, and I've really tried to understand the place where, when Trump says, let's get out of there, I say, yeah, let's get out because it's a mess. Well, it depends the issue, clearly. If you look at the 9/11 Commission report, the details aren't there. It's usually when it gets into politics that you can't believe people. I mean, and that comes down from the top, but individually, there's nobody in the FBI, the CIA, or the military that go out of their way. I mean, there's individual cases to systematically lie. What they do, though, is keep government workers with security clearances from going public. All my books are cleared by the CIA in the sense that there's classified. I have to take it out. There's no argument. It comes right out, or I mark it out. But there's a system where there's not much transparency, because if you work for the government, the CIA or the FBI, when you retire, you keep a security clearance, continue to work for the government, and those people are not talking. A lot of them will talk to me, but generally they can't afford to go out and talk and can't go public because their contracts are gone. So they just don't do it. And it's also, you don't usually take on the president or the commander-in-chief or the generals or the rest of it. But look at the CIA on Khashoggi. Gina Haspel, the CIA director, used to work for me. She knew what the game was on Mohammed bin Salman, the psychopath. She came out and said he ordered Khashoggi's killing. So you have a CIA director standing up to the politicians. Now, whether it's going to make a difference, I don't know, but it happens all the time. It is a system that doesn't work particularly well, and I think it should be more transparent. I simply don't understand why we don't have all the JFK files aren't declassified. I mean, look at it this way. I'm sorry about the JFK thing, but I did a series on it. I know what a classified document is. I know what a secret is. And the telephone calls between the Soviet embassy and the Mexican consulate, there's nothing secret about it. They withheld that for 50 years of what the Cubans and the Russians were talking about. So I don't know what the percentage of it is, but by hiding benign information, there's an enormous amount of Americans who are absolutely convinced there was a major cover-up on JFK. They don't trust. You go back to the distrust, it goes back to JFK. It's because the Warren Commission was not given most of the information, and Johnson told Hoover, I want the Cuban-Russian angle to go away. That's a matter of fact. That's a tape. So when people think about the government lying, they think about JFK. That's one of the first things. And then, of course, we have Vietnam and the Pentagon Papers, and it goes on. And if you don't have that transparency, I understand for short-term political reasons you wanted the problem to go away if you can't do anything about it, but if you want to lose the trust of the American people, you don't make it transparent, you stir things up. I mean, I keep on going to, I'm sorry about JFK, I keep on going and talking to FBI agents who investigate the ones that are still around, and I'm getting my answers, the ones I'm looking for, but when I get the answers, my suspicions go away more and more, but for the average person that doesn't have the time to do this, you can understand why you can't trust the government. It's political expediency more than some sort of evil plot that causes all the problems. The Shabab are close to the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda. It's a Sunni group. The Iranians have nothing to do with it. One problem you have in sub-Saharan Africa is global warming, unemployment. It's falling apart, and you've got the immigration. Now, the Europeans have shut down immigration, more or less, but still Africa is boiling, and it's not going away. I mean, when you think about it, you have to look at the bright side and that there hasn't been an attack in this country. Having made a lot of bombs, you don't need to be a great expert to do that. It's just there's not the will. It's sort of like the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The virus goes away. It's a combination of Shin Bet, the Internal Security Service, monitoring everybody and pinning this down, and the wind is out of the sails of these groups. And a lot of Al-Qaeda, the wind is out of the sails. They're getting fewer recruits. Now, there's been 4 or 5 Americans just arrested, but there's no indication that they were on their way back here, come across the Mexican border or whatever. So a lot of these problems have just gone away, and frankly, it's thanks to, we put a lot of money into counterterrorism, and they can spot these people, and they're just better at it. And we didn't see 9/11 coming because we weren't looking for it. I was still in the CIA when you had this hijacking. The Algerians were going to run an airplane into Paris, and no one took that seriously. Even there was a shootout at Marseille. No one believed it could ever happen here. And clearly, the deal was to lock the cockpit doors and change the protocol and don't give an airplane up ever. As the people at the Pentagon tell me, our hijacking airplane thing was pretty well solved on 9/11 when the crew took over the plane that crashed into Pennsylvania. I mean, it's, what do they call this, a gray rhino? It's a threat you should see coming, but you don't. I'm going to apologize, but in the CIA, I'm always taught to look at the worst case scenario. That's what you do. You just say, what's the worst thing that could happen? So that's the way I look at the world. And by the way, if you always look at it with the world pessimistically, psychologists will say you sound more intelligent. But I do think the Israelis are going to hit Iran as they build up, and I think there's going to be some point where there's going to be a major war. They're simply going to have to go back into southern Lebanon very quickly to take these missiles out. I do not think any Israeli prime minister can allow a buildup of Iran through the Levant. You can't do it. And it's not the politics of Bibi Netanyahu. It's just a fact. And the military, the IDF, is going to have a big say in this. Well, first of all, the CIA, until the war on terror, did not interrogate people, even arrestees, let alone waterboarding. So they knew nothing about it, and they went out to contractors in the Air Force who also knew nothing about it. And everybody looked at the history when the North Koreans did it or the Chinese. It was a form of creating propaganda so that our soldiers, if they were waterboarded, so they would go out and make statements. But there's no indication that torture gets intelligence. It just doesn't. I mean, I know the case in Algiers, and the French used it, and the ticking bomb, but the problem is you don't know who knows what. So if you cannot line up thousands of people and torture them until you get the answer, you pretty well. The only way it would ever work is if you knew the person had the answer, and you pretty well knew what the answer was, that there was a bomb somewhere, but you just didn't know which car, but you were absolutely certain. But that is such a rare, it's a black swan, and it just doesn't work. And she was in charge of a base in Bangkok, but I mean in Thailand. But by the time she got there, it was all done, and she was just an administrator. I mean, that doesn't exonerate it in legal terms or the rest of it, but it was approved by the Department of Justice. Not that it apparently means anything, but I think we're really lucky to have her. She's smart, she's tough, she's experienced, and she understands how the government works. And if she can take on the White House in the Khashoggi case, you know, all power to her. The assorted stands? That's Central Asia? Uzbekistan. I spent a couple years out there, and if you don't have a drinking problem now, you will have one by the time you spend. I used to drink with the Russian army there a lot, and I became a professional drinker of warm vodka, and then picking up a Kalashnikov and shooting it. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. See, this is why I'm not scared of the Russian army. I mean, we could beat the Russians in a couple days in a conventional war. What they used to do, is the most amazing thing, is we would go out and we would cook mushrooms with the officers and then start drinking. And I don't know, if you drank with Russians, you start half a glass of vodka or a full tumbler, and you first drink to, you know, your country and the other country, and then your mother's, and then it goes on until you can't walk. And then once you're stumbling around, they hand you a Kalashnikov or a grenade launcher, and you go out to the range. Well, that's bad enough, but what scared me is when the pop-up targets wouldn't come back up, they sent an enlisted guy downrange. I said, we gotta stop shooting. He says, no, just don't hit him. And the guy would go down, there's bullets going on each side, these drunk people, and so I'm not scared of the Russian army. But the Uzbekistan. I mean, those countries are, you know, they're still wrecks. They're absolute wrecks. They're wrecks. And that's how, by the way, you know, the Novichok we know about, because we were collecting that stuff out on the RLC, because where they were testing it. That's, you know, Salisbury, where they tried to kill the colonel, and the Novichok. We have samples of that. We collected those. I used to keep a Markhor sheep on my head that had been killed by a very rare pathogen. Very few people. It was safe, but I would tell people, but only my true friends would come to visit me at work. Well, actually, I'm writing a book on this, on faith and fear. I give lectures at universities. People who are afraid will look toward an authoritarian leader. They simply, and then they tend to look at the elite. Anybody with money, education, and they look at science itself as the enemy. And so you look at the 2008 recession, and you know, I'm going to give you a pessimistic message that if we hit another recession, you're going to see a lot of people that will take reason and science and fact and flush it down the toilet. For them, facts are accusations. And they will look to faith as a way to, and especially global warming. This is what I'm really taking a look at, is people, every time there's been great changes in the climate, it's led to disruptions. And, you know, the peoples of the sea, you know, the Enlightenment before that was there was a climate change, and they started burning witches in Germany, in Bamberg, and then the rest of it. So it's going to really depend, and as long as there's great inequality, and then people think they're suffering, and mainly people on the downward slope, like the Germans were in the 20s, tend to latch on to some irrational idea which makes no sense at all, and they're looking for a patriarch who, you know, for anybody looking at Hitler now, he made no sense at all. I mean, none on any level. And it was, and you look at the Khmer Rouge. They had one side, they had Vietnam, on the other Thailand, and they thought they were getting crushed. It was in the middle of war, and they took on an ideology that was just flat out insane. And there's such an established history that's what worries me most. That an Adolf Hitler in this country is not impossible, and if we hit an economic wall, we're going to get something pretty bad. That's the CIA way of looking at things, so I apologize. What keeps me up at night is global warming. I think it's real. I think we see it in the Southwest. We see it here, and it's going to change things fast. And we do not deal well with change. We grew up in a golden age. You know, I think we all did, and we just do not. We react badly to it. We do not react with reason and fact and science and the rest of it. And every time the temperature goes up or a glacier goes in, or you look at the weather in New Delhi's like microdosing arsenic, you know, all of those things scare me. And, you know, it may turn out well, we may be able to adjust, but when large numbers of people are sent whichever way, migrate, and they run into other people, it just, in humanity with Homo sapiens, we just don't do well. So, I mean, not that I have any solutions for global warming, but that's what keeps me up at night. We can live with terrorist attacks here and there, and we can win, and we can predominate, and we can predominate against the Russians. But if the climate does pick up, like some are predicting, that's what scares me.
Thank you very, very much for
Thank
being
you.
here. And again, a thank you to all of our sponsors. A special thank you to Jane Hochber for helping with the arrangements, making this a very special evening, and to everybody else who helped. Thank you.